And the next thing I know, they're telling Jeffrey he's got to take a haircut.
Mm.
The coach didn't really care. He said to Jeff, I don't care what they're saying, you've got to take a haircut. And so he comes home one day before the first game of the season and tells Anita he has to have his haircut. So she takes out his scissors and she cuts around a little. She gave him a haircut, cut off, I guess brought it up a little bit more, and that sort of quieted it. And then plays a couple of games, and so, you know, he was not a great basketball player, but he was certainly good enough to play first string center, and he was holding his own. I guess the last game we saw him play against Levittown, and he really had a great game. He scored 11 points and did a good job of controlling the boards at both ends. But after that game, they got after him again. They said, you've got to cut your hair again. You know? So he says, he comes home and with this story, he says, now I'm not going to give it. I don't think it's right. They have no right to tell me to cut my hair. And of course, my brother Myron, who many of you would know of, was a lot more aggressive. He was ready to handle his text. He was ready to take the whole school board text. It so happens at this time that Anita was teaching in this school district. Her principal comes to her one day and says, oh, are you the Mrs. Cohen whose son is having all this trouble on the basketball team? Or some words like that. So it was quite embarrassing. Anita did not have the tenure at the time, and here we are involved in this kind of thing. And Jeffrey says, it's not important enough to me. I quit the team. They don't want to let me play, but I don't want to cut my hair. I don't really have to live vicariously through my son. But I did take him aside and I said, Jeff, you're making a big mistake. He says, it's not important enough to me. The haircut is. It's a matter of principle. I think what was happening is some of his classmates were siding with him and looking upon him as a champion that's going to carry the ball, you know, this type of thing. And they were very proud of his position that he was taking. You know, so peer pressure was coming in where he almost couldn't back up. So he quit the basketball team.
Well, defying authority, questioning authority was in vogue at that period of time.
Probably was.
Or coming into.
And Seaford was very conservative. I mean, the coach came from Plainview, and up there, they were far ahead. There were a lot of kids that were growing their hair longer than just over the collar. So he left the team. The team was not very good when he was there. When he left, they were even worse.
Mm-hmm.
And one of his friends writes in the school newspaper, what's happened to the basketball team ever since Jeffrey Prince Valiant Cohen left the team under some hair-raising circumstances. Very nicely put, you know. His kid was a bright kid, and of course, Jeffrey was there. He ate it up. Basketball season ends. Track season begins. Jeffrey's also on the track team. Jeffrey's running the quarter mile, and Jeffrey is their best high jumper. So he's going out for the track team. I said, Jeff, they're not going to let you. You're going to have the same problem again. Why are you doing this? He said, nobody comes to watch track meets. I mean, a lot of people come to basketball games, but nobody comes to track meets. Nobody's going to know. I said, I don't think so. I think you're going to have a problem. Sure enough, before the first track meet of the season, they come to Jeffrey and they tell him he's got to cut his hair. And this time, of course, he's saying there's no way he's going to cut his hair. So I figured it's about time I had to get into the act. So I dropped off to see the superintendent of schools, Mr. Barola. He also, before he became superintendent, he was principal of one of the schools and got to know Anita very well. Anita taught his son. And I'm sure that he thought highly of Anita. So we had that. And one morning I go up to the superintendent's office unannounced. However, I get there early enough that I tell them who I am and I want to see him. He wasn't in yet. but I'm sure he now knew that I was coming. I went out, had a cup of coffee, and went back. And I spoke with him. He was very cordial. You know, and I said, and Mr. Varola, I said, you know my wife. We're not really trying to make trouble. But it's really pretty silly what they're doing. I had come armed with a couple of articles from the Sunday Times, one of which showed the Harvard coach, Harvard of all places, making the statement, I don't care how long the hair is on my kids, they would go through brick walls for me. That's the only thing I'm interested in. Then there was another article about the hexagonal track meet. For those that don't know, the hexagonal track meet was the Ivy League plus the Army, West Point, and Annapolis. And the article said something like, you sure can tell the boys from West Point and Annapolis, because they're the only ones with short hair.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I figured I had these two articles with me, so when I tell them what the story is, I said, look, we're not trying to make trouble, but it's pretty silly. So he pulls out a piece of paper and it says, rules for varsity ball, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now they had done this, and this is why when he was on the basketball team, he had no problem in wearing a jacket when he went to school all the time. This was de rigueur. This was also a badge. You know, you knew who the varsity players were.
Yes.
And this was fine. He didn't have a problem. The number 6 said, so he tells me this, and I said, yes. I said, look at Rule 6. I had no. Rule 6 says, all athletes shall have crew cuts. I said, what kind of rule is that now in today's day and age? So he admitted to me that his son, he was having trouble with his son, who was a little younger than Jeffrey. Was he Cheryl's age or a little older than Cheryl? But Anita had taught him, so we knew of him. He was admitting that he was having trouble having his son follow these rules of neatness and what have you. So he says, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to speak to the board of directors? I said, I would love to. However, the board meets next Wednesday, and whether that's the right day or not. And I have to go out to Salt Lake City on business, so I can't be here. And if I wait till the next week, it'll be a pyrrhic victory at best, because the track season will be over. So he says, do you want me to talk for you? Can you imagine? What's better than having the superintendent of schools go in?
Mm-hmm.
So, and he said, I'll contact you. So he did. And he calls me. Actually, he called me, I think, while I was in Salt Lake City. And he said, it's all settled. The emphasis will now be on neat grooming rather than short hair. So in a way, we broke down the boundaries that existed at that time for the Seaford School District. But this was just sort of the beginning, because I said to Jeffrey, I really don't agree with you. You know, this is silly. Someday you're going to be faced, somebody's going to make an offer to you of a good job, and they're going to say, but you have to wear a tie or some other such nonsense, and you're going to refuse the job because you don't want to put on a tie. You refuse the job because you don't want to cut your hair, whatever it is. He says, don't worry, Dad. Don't worry. If it's ever important enough, I'll do what it is. The test came, I guess it was the following summer, where through my influence, Jeffrey got a summer job working for Sperry in the computer science group. I was trying to get Jeffrey to major in computer science, and I got him this job. And I knew, of course, the people involved. So he shows up for work one day. He got the job without interviewing. You know, it was just on my say-so. So comes home, and that first day on the job, Jack Ratner was the manager of computer science, and he had Artie Isaacs was his staff member. So Artie comes into my office, and he says, boy, is Jack mad at you. I said, what do you mean? Why is he mad at me? He says, your son. I said, what about him? He says, his hair. I said, oh. You know, and these guys, Jack is still, and Artie, quite liberal for most of their beliefs, but so be it. I said, so tell him. Why are you telling me? Tell him. You know. So that day on the way home, Jeffrey says to me, they told me I have to cut my hair. I said, yes. He says, they don't mean it, do they? I said, yes, they do. He said, I said, see, now we're up to that point. It was a Wednesday, and the barber shops in Seaford are closed on Wednesday, so that's what Jeffrey said to me. He said, but the barber shops are all closed today. So I said, if I find a barber shop that's open, you cut your hair? He says, yes. So we get home, and I immediately call, and I find a barber shop and one toward the next town. And he's always about 10 to 7. I said, what time do you close? He says 7 o'clock. I said, leave the door open, we'll be right there. Even before we sat down to eat. So I walked into this bar, this old Italian, wasn't so old, I guess, barber. He takes one look at Jeffrey and says, boy, another Jesus Christ, am I going to love this? And he took off about half his head, you know? So he did. So Jeffrey proved to me if it was important enough, he would do what he had to do. That's the last time he cut his hair. For years, he went all through college, I think he didn't cut his hair. Speaking about college, one last anecdote about Jeff is Jeff applied. We took him around to see a few of the schools. You know, we went up to, if I remember correctly, we went to Syracuse, we went out to Lehigh, to Lafayette, to Bucknell. Went down to University of Maryland, as a matter of fact, during the summer. And he took one look at how big that school was, and he wanted no part of it. So he applied early admission to Lehigh. It wasn't an easy school. Lehigh is a great school. You know, Jeffrey did very well on his SATs. His average was never as high as we thought it should be. He was a very bright boy and all this kind of thing. But I think he sort of covered everything with over 700 on the math SATs, which I'm sure impressed Lehigh at the time. So they accepted him early admission. The worst thing that could have happened. His school year ended in the first month. There was no more interest in it. And I'm sure this has happened to a lot of kids. In any event, Jeffrey went off to school in Lehigh. And regardless of what else he might say at this time, he did survive the 4 years and got himself his degree. I think that's enough about Jeff. I think I'm just going to run through this. Not say very much about them until I get to Europe.
Okay.
That was 1971 when Jeffrey graduated from high school. And if you remember, I had mentioned before, when we took the 1969 trip, that the reason I felt so strongly about doing it is because I figured that's the last time that Jeffrey would want to go along with us. And I was right, because when Jeffrey hit 18, at that point, he wasn't interested in going on vacation with us. What vacation did we have? Well, that summer, we took a trip up to Maine, New England, and Nova Scotia. And Jeffrey wouldn't go with us. We just had Cheryl and Cliff. The same thing happened. We took another trip that winter down to Jamaica. And he really wasn't interested in traveling with us anymore. And I'm sure most kids feel that way. When they get to a certain age, they're going to pick their own vacations and who they're going to go with, and they don't want to have rules laid down by the parents anymore. So I think he missed out on some things. Let me speak a little about the Nova Scotia vacation, because something very critical, critical to our future happened at that point, and you'll understand as we go along. We drove up to Maine, and we took an overnight ferry to Nova Scotia. Now, if any of you are familiar with the Bay of Fundy, that's what we had to go across. Waters were very rough. The ferry was the kind that you put your car on and it took you, so really, and it was, they went outside the three-mile limit, so they had a casino on board, and it was quite interesting, except Anita got very sick. She and Cliff, I guess. I had no problems, and I guess Cheryl had no problems. But Cliff was saying, this was 1971, so Cliff was all of 10 years old at the time. Saying, why is everything rocking so much? It really was a rough trip. And ferry boats are not built like cruisers and stuff like that. So the impression it made on Anita, even though she feels that maybe we ate too much lobster or seafood, or gratin, or however they served it in Maine to take advantage of what was there, she contributed her nauseous feeling to that to the late meal that we had, and it maybe was so. In any event, it left such an impression on Anita that it took me years afterwards to convince her to go on a cruise. So that's what we were left with after that very nice trip. It was a nice trip all around, except for that. So we had no problem with that. As I say, the only lasting problem out of it was that Anita had to be convinced to go on a cruise, but I'll get to that later on.
Okay.
How much time do we have left?
The trip to New England, did you New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, that sort of thing, Rhode
Yes,
Island?
Yes, we went up, and from Long Island, if I remember correctly, we actually took the ferry to go across Long Island Sound, but that was not like the Bay of Fundy.
Did you camp out in a tent?
We are not campers. We are not. As we mentioned to you before, in our 1969 cross-country trip, we did it with a Buick Electra, I think. And that's our mode.
Yeah.
Different hotel every night, and that's fun. So we do that.
So it was the New England, Nova Scotia trip, and then you went to Jamaica, and then up to the Catskills, and then you ended up in Europe for a big trip.
Well, let me speak about the Catskill Dance
Sure.
Off. Cheryl remembers this vividly, and we have this on movie tape someplace. You know, they had this thing where they strung up two poles, and they had these monkeys up there, and they would be scattering across and stuff like that. And we walked under them at one time, and one of the monkeys made a grab for whatever Cheryl was holding in her hand.
Uh-huh.
You can imagine the panic that took place right then. She could probably tell you better than that, but I don't think she wants to get close to uncaged monkeys anymore after that. So that was what we had. That's my memory of the Catskill Game Club, and I'm sure hers. The next year, I believe it was the next year, Anita and I took a trip to Europe.
Without the children?
Without any of the children.
Uh-huh.
This was our own. I'm sure Anita's mother must have babysat the children, who were a lot older at the time. We took one of these, today is Tuesday, so it must be Belgium trips.
Uh-huh.
We covered 7 countries in about 2 weeks. So a good part of it ended up in Italy, so we must have spent a full week in Italy.
Did you start out in London?
We started out in London. They flew to Amsterdam, saw Amsterdam. See, it's a while ago, I can remember. We then went over to Germany, Cologne, as they call Cologne. There was a boat ride down the Rhine for part of that distance. From Germany, might not be in the same right order, we went to Austria into Switzerland, into the Alps, and Switzerland into Italy. Is that 7 countries? England? Oh, we were Paris too. We hit Paris. So Paris must have been after Amsterdam to Paris to Cologne. That's England, Netherlands, France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Italy.
Ended up in Italy and Rome.
Ended up in Italy, Rome. Actually, half the trip I think was in Italy, which was very good. We saw Rome, we saw Florence, saw Venice. We fell in love with Venice. I mean, I think that Venice is the most romantic place in the whole world. To sit, we did some rooftop dancing there, and we both loved it.
Uh-huh.
It really was, you just felt like you had the world in your control.
Preferred it to Florence. I've heard good things about Florence.
Florence was great.
Mm-hmm.
Florence was a wonderful place to go. And we have one extra story to tell about Florence.
Okay.
You know? I like eating, as all of the family knows, and I like Italian food. I did back then too. Anita had an address, a restaurant, recommended by some teacher friend of hers, and she had it in her pocket. Well, when we checked into the hotel in Florence, after we checked in, we went down to have our dinner, and we went over sat down at a table, and they gave us a menu. We looked at the menu, it looked very promising, very interesting. And we started to order, and they said, "Are you with the tour?" We said, "Yes, we are." They said, "Oh, you're not supposed to be sitting here." So they moved us to where the tour people sat. They gave us a different menu.
Oh.
And I was fuming. I mean, I really was quite annoyed at this whole situation. I never liked to be treated as part of a crowd. And Anita, bless her, understood what was going on. She said, "You don't want to eat here, do you?" I said, "No, I don't." So we got up and left. And at the desk, she pulls out this address of this other restaurant. And luckily it's right across the plaza, the piazza, whatever you call that, from where we were. So they gave us directions to go to this place. And we walk across the plaza, and we're down a side street that's not wide enough, maybe wide enough, including the curbs, for a car to go through. They're very dark, and here we are in this strange country, hadn't been here, and looking for this place, and we see a sign up there, and it indicates the place. And we open up the door, and there's a big staircase that goes down, and we're in the kitchen. And somebody says, "Yeah, this is the right place, though, right way to go." So we go down there, and we're walking past these sides of beef that are hanging on the side there, you know. I don't know what the health was in those days, but in any event, we sat down at a table, and it was one of the nicest, one of the best meals we had in the whole trip.
Mm-hmm.
We really felt good. And what they did is they put a big bottle of Chianti on the table, and you helped yourself. And they charged you, at the end of the meal, they saw how much wine was left. And they charged you, and it worked out to a very reasonable, like a quarter for each glass that we had. And real good, I can't tell you exactly what the Italian food was, but probably veal parmesan. We were in the veal parmesan stage. And that was great. You know, we felt like we really did it. We outsmarted the stupid people who didn't want to feed us from the right menu.
You started out talking about Venice being romantic. Was it the gondola and the atmosphere?
We were on the gondola, but I think that the best part of it is we were staying at the Governor Grunewald or some such name like that, and it had rooftop dancing. And I love to dance with Anita.
Yes.
She says she loves to dance with me too, so that's fine. And there you are, under the sky, under the stars. You know, it's just wonderful. And we love water. We love to see water, even, which is why we become such cruise nicks nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
We always think that even though you don't quite get the cruise like they show you in the movies, you know, or on the Love Boat, but there is enough romanticism involved, which we always associate with water.
And a lot of sky.
A lot of sky, a lot of water. No tourism, no buy this, buy that, go look, and you go see the same things all over, no matter what it is. And that's how Venice, we did get back to Venice many, many years later. As a matter of fact, this was in 1972, did I say?
Yes, July, I think you said.
We got back to Venice in 2005, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or 4.
Mm-hmm.
2004.
2 years ago.
Yes, we took it to a cruise that started in Venice,
Oh.
so that we went there a day earlier, so that we could see it. And Venice is like no place else in the world as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that Grand Mark, St. Mark Island, or whatever it is, with the Grand Plaza there, it's just incomparable. So we loved it. And it was not the only place in Italy we loved, but it had a charm all its own. We liked Florence. We liked Rome.
Mm-hmm.
We saw the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Mm-hmm.
That was a special. And I think I sort of pushed it myself. It wasn't on the original plan. So I asked somebody, you know, how far away? Why, you know, it looks like we're going to get close to it. Why don't we just stop there? And we did. We ended up stopping in Pisa. And fascinating, you know, to walk up to the first floor, and you look out, you think you're going to slide off. It really is, again, a wonder of the world.
Mm-hmm.
One last thought about the European trip. We couldn't really forget our children at home. We hadn't planned to take them, but by the time we finished the trip, we kept saying, boy, Cheryl and Cliff would really love this or love that. And we were convinced that the next time we did go to Europe, we would try to take the children, that they would come with us, because there was a lot to see. We wouldn't do it as rush as this 7 countries in 14 days. That's you hardly get a chance to look anyplace. Yes, we saw the Louvre, and yes, we saw the art in Rome, and the Sistine Chapel, and all the other things that you're supposed to. But you sort of saw everything on the run. We talked about it and thought that the next time we go, we would concentrate on maybe 1 or 2 or 3 places. And if we would do that, then we could really appreciate the beauty of Paris, Versailles. Great places, great things to see. London, you know, London is a lot easier to take because you don't worry about whether you can speak the language or get directions or what have you. It's often said about the people in Paris. You know, when we went to Holland, we were impressed by how everybody was so cooperative. You asked them questions, and it's almost like they were anxious to speak to you in broken English. When you got to France, they don't even want to talk to you if you're not going to speak their language. So both Anita and I had studied French in high school. Actually, I took Spanish in college. I think Anita may have taken some French in college. So we had this school French to try to work, and they really made you feel dumb. You were asking directions. They didn't want to, I'm sure that they understood a lot of what we were saying, whether it was English or whether it was pidgin English, you know, whatever we're talking. But it was hard. It was hard. One other thing to mention about Holland is we were amazed that we could read their menu in Dutch, which is very close to German, based upon the little Yiddish that we knew. I mean, we saw something on the menu called Hack the Flesh, And we know that that means chopped meat in Yiddish. So our Yiddish proved to be more helpful in Holland and Germany than our 3 years or 5 years of French was in France. I thought I had 1 minute before.
No, that's good. I just want to see, that's good, a good smile, Lionel. You had a very good life.
Yes, well, all people have to do is take a look at the pictures and see what a gorgeous woman I have
Yes, yes,
with me all the time.
yes.
I mean, what made Venice so romantic?
Being with a saucy woman.
Being with Anita.
Yes.